Welcome everybody. This is our ninth CoRE conversation. These are short half-hour webinars that we run quite regularly at Women's Health Grampians. And this one today is focusing on resistance and backlash. My name's Deb Harris and I'm a CoRE consultant and youth lead at Women's Health Grampians, and I'm joined today by Kate Diamond-Keith.
Hi everyone, I'm Kate and I'm a Senior CoRE Consultant and Health Equality Lead at Women's Health Grampians. Welcome everyone.
And we're very lucky to have Katja in the background, who is driving the slides and helping us with tech. Katja will be adding any of the resources that we talk about today into chat. We generally don't have time for questions, but if you do have a burning question, please pop it in chat and we will get back to you, or alternatively, you can email myself or Kate directly or any of the Women's Health Grampians team. So our work at Women's Health Grampians is grounded in respect, and with that in mind, I really want to acknowledge that we're on Wathaurong country today, myself, Kate and Katja. This is an artwork by Tanisha Lovett, who is a Gundjamara and Watchabaluk woman, and this was commissioned as part of our Reconciliation Action Plan. We are incredibly fortunate to be amongst the oldest continuous living culture in the world, and we pay our respects to elders past and present and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people in the room today. All right, you've been invited along to this today because you are part of CoRE member organisations. For anyone who's unsure, CoRE is an alliance of 139 member organisations, all working on a collective impact model with the goal of eliminating gendered violence and obviously doing that via the elevation of gender equality. So thank you all for coming along today. You may recognise some of the logos on the screen, and we're thrilled to have so many of you with us. Quick overview of what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be covering resistance and backlash. What are they and why they occur? We're going to be looking at some examples of these, particularly in the space in which we're working around gender equality and the prevention of violence. We're going to be looking at some techniques that have been successful. Obviously, for those of us who work in this space, we deal with this quite a lot. We're going to give you some practical resources and support, and then we'll end with some upcoming CoRE opportunities in which you can all access.
Okay, now we are going to look at what we mean by resistance and backlash, and we're going to start by watching this short video from Safe and Equal on what is resistance. I'll just get that going.
What is resistance?
I think resistance can happen when people have their privilege challenged and when their peers confront them about their harmful culture against women.
It seems that anything that threatens the status quo creates a lot of unnecessary fear.
Resistance means people who are challenging things or ideas that they might find threatening.
As a practitioner working in the prevention sector, I think that resistance is experienced across the continuum. And this is from sort of a covert undermining of initiative through to more overt aggressive forms of backlash.
I actually think resistance can be a good thing. It's usually a sign that the social change process is having an impact. The important thing is how we navigate the tension that arises. I see it as an opportunity to connect people with different experiences and perspectives and to build dialogue.
I think in the first stages of making change, there is that resistance, and I think it is kind of a reminder that not only is it having an impact, but it's also people are thinking about what you're saying. People are taking it into account and they're rethinking things. And even if that is negative at first, they are still thinking about what you have to say.
It can start and spark conversations, so people can be going about their work without actually reflecting on what it is that they're doing. They've done it that way for a long time, so they keep doing it that way.
I think resistance comes along with the territory of doing respectful relationships work and preventing gender-based violence. This work means empowering people. It means empowering women to know their rights in a relationship and in their life. It means empowering people to be there for their friends and loved ones. And it means fighting harmful ideas and stereotypes to create a society that is more inclusive.
going to talk about how resistance can occur. So resistance describes the various forms of pushback generated by policies, programs, and perspectives that aim to create progressive social change. So anyone working to create social change, so this is all of you, will inevitably experience resistance and backlash. This is very relevant to CoRE members working in the gender equality and prevention of violence against women space. The best way to understand resistance is as an indicator of success. Resistance occurs precisely when existing norms, structures, and practices are effectively challenged and threatened. And there are some examples of this on the slide and how this can happen for individuals, in organisations, and in wider systems.
This is a great slide showing the spectrum and the different ways in which resistance can occur. But then at the very far left, we have backlash. And I think it's important to distinguish between what is resistance and backlash. So backlash is a very overt and aggressive form of resistance. So it often involves threats of violence, threatening behaviours. It is far and beyond the normal debate that we would see, and it actually heads over into being an OH&S issue. If you are a CoRE organisation and you have backlash occurring, this is an OH&S issue, and at times it actually stretches into a criminal issue as well. It should never be tolerated, and it is not something that is within the normal realms of debate or conversation. So if we work from right to left, we look at denial. Denial is saying there's no problem. And so basically how we would see this in our work is people saying to us things like, oh, we don't really have a problem with that here. We'll also see this in terms of victim blaming, trying to minimise what is happening.
The disavow is the next one. This is when someone might say, this is not my job, or it's not in my job description, and that someone else is in the organisation is responsible for that. So that's an example of that one.
Inaction is basically just what it says. It is being inactive. So just declaring that this is not a priority, it's not something that we can do or that we need to do.
The next one is appeasement. So an example of this is when people agree that it is an issue. Yes, this is an issue, but they can't do something about it now. One day we'll do something, but just not now.
Appropriation, this is one that we see quite often. It's basically when people seem to agree with what you're saying, but they're actively undermining the work that you're doing. And so an example of this will be, of course, we would appoint more women, but if only they were more experienced, or they just don't apply, or they don't have the right skills. And in fact, that's usually not the case.
So now we're moving down the spectrum towards the active phase. So co-option. Co-option is really a form of manipulation using the messages of initiative to turn people against it. For example, what about men? They are victims of violence too.
And then finally, before we get to sort of the very end, which is backlash, we have repression. So again, we have it's the active dismantling of an initiative. And so therefore we've tried to do this, but women simply didn't take up the opportunity, or they didn't apply, or it wasn't something that people were interested in.
So Deb, talking about resistance, is resistance always a bad thing? What can it also signify, do you think?
I'd like a bit of resistance, Kate. I think it's actually a good thing. I think it says that we're making people think. Yes, this issue is very confronting, but I think it makes people uncomfortable, and that's why we sometimes get resistance. But it also means that we're helping them to think about the issue and reflecting on their own behaviours and attitudes, and identifying some of their own biases. So I think it can be a really good thing.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to move on to how to respond.
Yes. So how do we respond to resistance? So we do this via what we call framing strategies. And so when we do that, it's how we explain why an issue is important. It can influence how people feel and think about an issue, and ultimately how they might respond. And so some of the framing strategies that we use a lot will be articulating the rationale and benefits for everyone. So again, noting the benefits to men as well as to women, and to the broader community as well. We offer clear and compelling accounts of the problem and the solution. So embedding some of those real life stories that we may have seen, and how this eliminating this problem is of benefit to everyone, and what we can sort of look and see in terms of future and how this may look. These can be really influential and really powerful too, and this can be used at an organisational level. We acknowledge that this is personal, it's difficult, it's uncomfortable, but also that it can be a structural issue as well, and it involves unequal relationships of power. So these are conversations about our personal lives and the systems itself that actually uphold gendered violence and the attitudes that underpin it.
So let's look now at a practical guide for framing a response to resistance. And there are 5 steps showing on the screen. The first one is speak to people's best self. And this means being willing to listen and appeal to the emotions and values of people's better selves, the side that most people want to believe themselves to be on. This can significantly reduce people's prejudices. Next is create common ground. So finding something that you agree on with the person and using it as a starting point. People will be more likely to be supportive if you can express your shared identity and build on common ground. Number 3 is talking about change. So framing the issue in a way that makes change feel possible by using examples of success or evidence of how a particular action will create the desired change. The aim is to present a healthy balance of both positive and negative, problem and solution. Number 4 is about making it real, making your argument human and real to people. You'll be more successful at changing minds when you embed factual evidence within a broader message around values and emotions of an audience, and tells a story about real people and real experiences. And the last one, number 5, is around avoiding reinforcing unhelpful frames. And this means, not getting caught up in debunking people's incorrect arguments, assumptions, or biased evidence. This can often draw you into a messy debate that doesn't actually serve to further your point or strengthen your frame. Instead, focus on spreading truths, sticking to your evidence and your argument. So let's look at that in an example, Deb.
Yes, and this is one, the What About Violence Against Men is one that I think those of us that work at Women's Health Grampians would hear at least once a week. So we're going to use this strategy and work through this. So when we're looking at speaking to people's best selves, we can use things like, creating that common ground that we've talked about as well. And this often goes hand in hand when we're speaking to their best selves. So for example, we could talk about, I can tell that you're really concerned about the safety and well-being of men, and that's great. It may be that we talk about all forms of violence and discrimination are unacceptable. I think we can both agree that we don't want to see men or women being hurt. And again, looking at that common ground and creating a way forward so you can begin to have more of a detailed conversation. When we talk about evidence and change, this is where you can have a bit more of a detailed conversation. So it's important that we don't muddy the waters in this section. So again, acknowledging that this is in fact gendered. This is a gendered issue. Looking at the evidence and the way in which men and women and gender diverse people experience violence differently, and that men are most likely to be the perpetrators. So acknowledging that this can happen to men, but the evidence tells us that this is the way this generally plays out. And we can acknowledge the fact that, those negative gender norms negatively impact men and women, but particularly, acknowledging that this plays out for women often via gendered violence, but we also see very poor mental health outcomes for men and the inability to be able to freely express themselves. So giving a balanced view, I think, is really important, but not shying away from what the evidence tells us and that this is absolutely a gendered issue. And then when we look at making it real, I think that's really where we can talk to things like how this affects our community. Obviously, in the last 12 months, we've certainly seen that play out in Ballarat, and that there is hope for us to move forward. And again, that's where we can sort of move into those, not reinforcing those unhelpful frames, that we can all work together in doing this. So this is not about creating conflict between men and women, if you like. This is about moving forward together to create change.
Thanks, Deb. So we've talked a lot about what you can do as an individual, but now I'm going to talk about the importance of organisational support and what organisations can do. So it's important to have skills as individuals to respond to resistance and backlash, but we also need organisational support. This means support from your executive and leadership to respond to resistance and backlash, because without this, resistance can really flourish. Organisations that support responding to resistance and backlash create a healthier, safe and respectful workplace culture, which is really important. And staff experiencing resistance and backlash should be supported to access their employee assistance programs and other support services that you have available. And safe workplace policies should always apply for staff. So what can Women's Health Grampians, offer you around this particular issue? Well, we have lots of resources that can support you. We have lots of training. All our CoRE members have a WHG staff member who is their CoRE consultant. So please get in contact with them for further information around staff training and what other supports that we can provide. And then there are lots of other resources out there. For example, Our Watch has lots of resources and information around resistance and backlash that you can access. And your CoRE consultants can point you in the right direction around those resources and supports that are available. But yeah, we're always available to talk to you about this and how you can be supported in your organisations.
So our key messages for today are that resistance is actually, it can be a good thing. It's a sign that your work is gaining traction. It means that you're making people question what it is they're doing and their ideas and beliefs. Backlash is an OH&S issue and it should never be tolerated. There is quite a distinction between the two, which we've covered. And again, as workplaces, this is not something that you should be expected to put up with, and certainly from a leadership perspective needs to be stamped out. There are many techniques that you can implement to cope with or address resistance. And like Kate has said, our training package, which is much more detailed than what we're doing today, can help you with this. Continue to arm yourself with knowledge and to be aware of this issue. Continue to learn more about it. Practice those ways in which you can come back at people when there is some resistance. Obviously, those respectful debates are really important. So continue to practice. And remember that you are not alone in this work. You obviously have our WHD team. You have people within your workplace as well. And there are obviously, like we've said, 139 CoRE member organisations all working in this space to eliminate gendered violence. So again, there's always opportunities for partnership and support and looking at some different strategies. And always prioritise your own wellbeing as well. This can be really difficult work. It's not always easy. And so obviously make sure that you take time to look after yourself because you can't look after other people until you've actually looked after yourself. So what have we got coming up, Kate? There's always something going on at Women's Health Grampians, but our next CoRE conversation is on the 14th of May. You can actually use your phone and register via the QR code there if you want to, but we will be sending an invite out to all of you. That conversation will be around LGBTQIA+ and inclusive language and how important this is. We will send something out to you with our upcoming events, including this one, and you'll be able to register. So we are running remarkably ahead of time, Kate. I'm not sure if we will be sending out all of the resources via an email that we've talked about today. But if there are any questions, we do have a few extra minutes. So if there's any questions people want to ask or pop in chat, we can have a look at those. And like we've said, if you feel like you'd like to contact us directly, you absolutely can. And we'll be staying online for a few minutes after this. Karch has just popped up a little evaluation for you to do. Like we said, these are short conversations that we run. We're always happy to go into more detail if you wanted to access our training packages, or any of our staff can talk to you in more detail. So if we can get you to fill those in, that would be great.
But yeah, while you're doing that, if anyone's got a question for us or an example that they'd like to talk about or talk through or any reflections, yeah, please pop it into chat or let us know.
I think Kate and I could probably have 20 examples of the different things we come up against, and they will probably not be unlike things that you've already heard as well. Thanks, Raylene.
Thanks, Raylene. Great to have you here. Thanks, Kim. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Kim.
We've got a question from Carol Deb. Do the forms and examples of resistance escalate from passive to active, or do they tend to be fairly consistent?
I think we would see the entire spectrum, and I think obviously that it is a spectrum. Again, some of that is a little bit subjective too, because what might be at the other end of passive, but the tone in which someone says it can be a little bit more aggressive or not. But certainly when you're seeing a spectrum like that, there's a good chance that you're going to be seeing some backlash within an organisation as well, and that's where it becomes really important that strong leadership step in. And make sure that they're confident in explaining why this is not an option in terms of how people are expressing themselves, but as an organisation, you're committed to this work.
And I think going back to the 5 kind of framing strategies that I talked through, if they are used effectively, normally, in response to the more passive forms of resistance, then usually, you would be able to bring that person along with the conversation. Sometimes people can go straight to outright backlash, and I think the online environment is where you see a lot of that straight to that overt threats, aggressive kind of backlash. But usually, in organizations, the more common occurrences that I've seen is around, the kind of middle to passive end. And if you use the strategies that we've talked about today, they can be very, very effective.
And I think, like you've said, Kate, consistency is everything. And that's where, that quick one-off event isn't nearly as effective as continual, consistent, events and education that organisations do throughout the year, and a real buy-in from leadership.
Any other questions while we're here? Thanks, Carol. Thanks for that feedback.
Thank you.
Well, we might wrap it up. Thanks, everyone, for coming today.
Remarkably on time.
I know, we're very much on time. And thanks for your feedback to our little quiz on the screen there. That's very appreciated. And we'll see you all at the next one in May.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.